Hey everybody, Conscious Medium Brandon Russ. Thanks so much for joining us here today. There seems to be a theme in the air, and why fight it? Those of you that are longtime Metallica fans have probably heard the news about James Hetfield's breakdown over the weekend about his mental state. He actually had a tough time heading out on a stage, and he talked about it openly before a concert even started. I mean, think about it. The lights are meant to go down, the song and the music come up, the amps glare, and then you hit them with your best tune right out of the gate. It's not the way this Metallica show started. James came out on stage and told everybody he wasn't feeling it. He was out of sorts and he needed the help of others. What happens next is incredible, as his bandmates came out and hugged him. Now, listen, there's a lot to be said about the machoism of men. But what does this have to do with healing? It has to do everything with healing. I'm going to do a quick deep dive into the chart of James Hetfield of Metallica and understand why he would have such a public breakdown for his own good, for his own healing, and what we can all take from it. Coming up next on In the Stars is James Hetfield, and a topic we all need to start talking about during Mental Health Awareness Month. Coming up next. All right, everybody, welcome back. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'm just going to kind of go through really quick who James Hetfield is. He's a lead singer of the band Metallica. They really kind of ruled the late 80s and early 90s with three bombastic albums from Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and then Injustice for All. And then their mega hit, The Black Album, which featured Enter Sandman. You all know the song. If you're a Yankees fan, it was Mariano Rivera's walk-off song. And Lord knows that every Metallica band or cover band took over the world. Well, I'm going to actually focus in on one James Hetfield, who had a breakdown in South America on May 14, 2022. And it's a really interesting take here, because what we're seeing is this macho persona and this masculine energy really kind of falling apart. Maybe it's because of all the pressures of what has gone on within the astrology right now, how things are kind of coming together. But there's really specific things that I want to point out in his chart. Now, first of all, if you grew up listening to Metallica, I really hope you like and subscribe to this. If you don't know who Metallica is, or you always thought that they were a bombastic band, I really hope I bring out the human element of this. As they really kind of grew, there was something that happened to the band continuously that made them face their demons. Cliff Burton died in 1986 in Sweden in a bus accident. And the band never really had a chance to grieve, as they turned around, buried him literally, and then went right back on tour again. Master of Puppets was flying off the shelf and everybody was talking about them. They went into the studio with a replacement bassist, Jason Newsted, who carried them through for about 19 years. That's kind of crazy. And through that time, Jason Newsted actually had real problems with the band because he never really fit in. Well, it was because James and Lars Ulrich, the longtime drummer and founders of the band, never really dealt with the trauma of losing a bandmate, especially in the way that they did. One of the things that came out of Some Kind of Monster, the documentary, as they searched for not only a new bassist, but also their own identity. They went through a midlife metal crisis, if you will. They had been in the business for over 15, 20 years, or close to 20 years, and they needed to kind of reinvent themselves. They had come off of mega hits, and they had really made a place for where they wanted to go. Now remember, Metallica at its core is a garage band. They're a band that works in heavy distortion, heavy riffs, and a lot of angry lyrics. So for them to start to show their emotions, they realized that during the filming of this, they had to face their alcoholism, James in particular. He was in and out of rehab a couple of times, and it was well documented. His own work that he was doing. Kudos. Now, as we fast forward here into 2022. They now have a long-time bass player that came out of that, Robert Trujillo, who was a veteran of the rock and metal scene. He had worked with everybody from Ozzy to Suicidal Tendencies. He was a road warrior at heart, and he really kind of fit the band. And they vowed to not treat him the way that they treated Jason. Growth on their part. But I want to start to take a look at James's chart in particular. Oh, there they are hugging on stage. What brought us up to that? Well, a couple of things here. I'm going to bring up James's chart. I'm going to bring up James, and then I'm going to get rid of myself. I want to talk about a couple of aspects here that are really important. First of all, I have heard your messages, and I'm going to continue to try and do my best with these graphics. These are the tools that I have right now. I'm doing the best that I can. I'm always improving them, but stay tuned. I've got some surprises that I'm developing behind the scenes. So first and foremost, his Lilith is in Scorpio in his 10th house. This leads to him actually being in a position where he is going to heal in a very public way, right? So this is him. I'm going to put myself in the bottom left-hand corner. I can't not be in this. How you doing, everybody? So here is James healing in a very public way. So Lilith is kind of about the energy of what you're afraid of, right? It's also the energy of that deep underscore work that you're meant to do in this life. And he's a Scorpio. And it's in his 10th house. The very public 10th house. This is his career. Of course they're going to have a documentary about his alcoholism. Of course they're going to have a very public display of when he lost his bass player and the struggles that he's had with us. Of course he's going to come out on stage and talk about just not feeling it tonight. And by the way, when his bandmates came out and hugged him, that was real emotion. True emotion. And I'm going to bring this up again to really kind of show this. I don't care if this blocks me out. Imagine coming to a concert and this is how it starts. Guys, I want to point this out. This is not, oh, this is horrible film work right here. I'm going to go back over here and hide myself. But this is how a Metallica show starts. You're ready to amp up. You're ready to rock out. And this is how it happens. This is how it starts. It's a pretty impressive thing when you start to realize that someone is willing to do the work right in front of you. Well, James, in no uncertain fashion, has some other things that are happening here for him. He also was born in the 12th house with Sagittarius. Well, as we know, Sagittarius is the most prone for addiction qualities, depending upon its placement in the 12th house, the house of the undoing, the house of the uncovering, the house of the unveiling, the secret stash of where you're supposed to go. The kindest guy, but if he likes a certain particular alcohol, he's going to drink all of it until he's done. His struggles are very well noted here. His struggles are very well in your face. And in the 12th house, of course, it is the house of the undoing. It almost ruined his musical career more than once, and his battle of depression is long withstanding. He also has this super strength that builds him up, which is Sagittarius in the 11th house as well. He has one of those anomalies where he's able to kind of like bring it back and forth. Oh, and by the way, he's a Leo sun, so of course he's, out there and he's gregarious and he's trying to take over the world in whatever way he can. And his sun was in the 7th house, which is about relationships, so of course it's about his bandmates. Of course it's about who he is. All right, James, there's enough room for both of us on stage here. Trust me. Has Lars showed you nothing? Right? And by the way, after being in countless bands and covering most of their catalog at any given time, not so much the later stuff, but certainly from the Black Album and before, throw on whatever song, I'll be your backup. But the dynamic here with James and his chart is how much activity is going on in the 11th house here and the 7th house. And it's funny because the way that his dynamic really kind of rolls, I want to point out one thing here. And how his moon is in Capricorn. This Capricorn moon is pushing emotions down. Right? His Mercury in Virgo, well, that's just kind of a cutting edge tongue. Great for a lead singer talking about everything from the Holocaust to the horrors of war to finding your own voice in the light. By the way, I know more about Passover through the song Creeping Death than I ever learned from the Bible. Go ahead and look up the lyrics alone if you don't like their music, and you'll understand why it is that that my appreciation for the Charlton Heston film started with Metallica. Have fun with that in the Ten Commandments, guys. So anyways, just taking a look at his chart and how his emotions are going to be suppressed. He is also the very kind of uniqueness of being a sun sign here in Leo with that combination means that he's outgoing and gregarious, but he doesn't have to feel it along the way. It's really kind of an interesting dynamic, wouldn't you say? He really kind of loves and adores who he is. And oh, by the way, his ascending is also in Capricorn. So he's got a couple kind of double down here. Did I just misspeak that? Yeah, no, his rising and moon is in Capricorn. So he's got a double Capricorn. So emotions are traditionally pushed down for him. Things are getting real here for Mr. Hetfield. And we're beginning to really kind of understand this. Now, the last aspect that I want to talk about this is that Chiron, on the day that he was born, which is important to his natal chart, which is the hand that you're dealt to work with your entire life, his Chiron was in the second house of Pisces. This, my friends, is the reason why he was crying on stage. This is the reason why he wrote such masterpieces like Fade to Black. By the way, look that up. In 1986, it kept a lot of us from not wanting to be here because you heard him emotionally talk about what it would be like if you weren't here. And he wrote a very poignant conversation about suicide called Fade to Black. Set the tone for an entire generation. And if you're plus or minus 50, you guys know the song. 100%. It was a very real, raw, and emotional thing. And it actually pulled you from the depths of where you were. By the way, remember all those congressional hearings when they put John Denver on trial and Dee Snider from Twisted Sister? Metallica was being pulled into the fray, and James basically said, the song is about not killing yourself. Do you really want to give me a platform? And they disinvited him from Congress. Dee Snider did just fine. He's an interesting cat himself too, but I don't think they were ever going to put Metallica on stage there in front of Congress, but boy, I think James would have really eaten them alive. He's a pretty eloquent fellow, and with this Capricorn rising and this Capricorn moon, he would not really care if he offends you. He's driven. Now, his Mercury in Virgo is very specific. Also, it causes tension in a band when somebody wants to do a side project and he says, there is only one band and it is ours. That's how driven we need to be. That's where things like that come from. His Venus is also in Leo, which really kind of drives to the fact that he is going to do what he loves and loves what he does. Period. End of conversation. He actually has one saving grace in all of this where his Mars is in Libra. So he is able to see the other side of it, which actually makes for a great storyteller. His Jupiter, though, is the other part I really want to talk about. Last thing, actually, on the Chiron thing. I'm sorry, I got a little distracted there. I want to talk about the Chiron aspect and then, of course, the Jupiter aspect here. The Chiron in the second house of Pisces really leads to the understanding that in this life, he's put into a position where, you know what, he really needs to heal. He really needs to get the emotional key to the challenges of daily living. Think about that. And then he has to do it in a very practical way. Now, he's a family man. I think he has 4 children. I know he has at least 3. I think he has a daughter that's a little bit older. But he, he has 3 young kids, and I think they're all under 23 now at this point. And he's a family guy. He talks about it very openly about who he is and what he's about. And he talks about the relationships that he needs to have. Now the healer, the wounded healer in Chiron is understanding that you have to take the personal responsibility for your own growth and start to pay attention to your things. I'm going to tell you exactly what he was battling before he walked out on stage. He was dealing with the idea of, how much longer do I have to be away from my family? My healing component is, what am I for these people? Great that I'm here and I'm making money. Fantastic, the machine travels on. But now he's going to begin to really kind of look at this. And I have to say this, Metallica fans, you're not going to like this. I think this is part of his realization for him to retire. I think he's going to look it dead in the face and say, I'm going to just do maybe 20 shows a year now. Which, he doesn't need the money, guys. Does not need the money. He's actually really kind of nailed everything that he needed to be when it came to knocking it out of the park financially. Right? Now, the last thing that I want to bring about is that his Aries, or his Jupiter rather, is in Aries. So he is actually facing his Jupiter returns, which, by the way, is a 12-year cycle, which, by the way, was right around the time where some kind of monster was filmed. He's going in through the dark night of the soul, but it looks different this time for him, and he's gaining his strength. And I can't think of a better topic during Mental Health Awareness Month than to point out the cycle of a man of maturity in his own healing. He took responsibility. He didn't go to the bottle like he did when he was younger. Metallica used to literally be called Alcoholica because of how much they drank. Instead, they've evolved and they faced their demons. He did it at about 2010 when he entered rehab for the second time and said, I can't do this anymore. I treated an incredible guy in Jason Newsted like absolute garbage because I didn't deal with my bereavement of losing my other friend, Cliff. But he's a machine. He needs to keep going. He's driven. He has Scorpio in his 10th house, which means that he loves to write about stuff about, hey, I'm going to talk about the real stuff. I'm going to be a little bit mystic, but I'm also going to talk right to the point at the same time. Makes him a great lyricist, by the way. Then when you analyze the idea that his Jupiter is returning again, it means that he is facing the things that will make him great as a person over and over again, cyclically. By the way, the year that Cliff Burton died was also one of the years of his Jupiter returns. Pay attention. You understand that we're all in this cycle of life. We all think that cycle of life is birth to death. But there's many mini cycles in between it. As I began to have an affection, an aficionado-ness of astrology, I did a lot of work with the Mayan calendar to understand cycles. James Hetfield's cycle of growing and getting bigger and becoming who he is meant to be to the people in his life took a huge step. He said he needed help, and his bandmates, Sagittarius, 11th house, he's a good time, man. We got your back. His bandmates had his back. I'm going to be doing more videos about how bands work together, how their astrology works together. I've taken a look at James's chart a couple of times, and the one thing that really jumped out at me was how steadfast and ardent he is about being the best and biggest band in the world, and he achieved it. Now he's into the second half of his life, whatever that means, and he's able to now finally work on himself. That's what you saw in South America. That's why you saw a group hug of a heavy metal band that talks about death, dismemberment, and taking over the world. Being trapped in a body from the horrors of war. Their second biggest hit, called One. By the way, that was the one that they famously lost to Jethro Tull in the metal category. And then later won the next year on a technicality. We really don't know how to perceive new things, do we? We try and put them into categories. Well, let us understand the normalization that we should start to bring for someone that is open and honest for their own mental health. He ripped off the Band-Aid and they might not have gotten their, quote, money's worth. They want him to come out and be aggressive and scream and growl like he is so known to do. And then you realize that he's human. And that mental health affects all of us. The fact that James Hetfield has chronicled his journey in such a way, both by pen and by raw emotion in front of 75,000 fans, is nothing short of an evolution. We are evolving, and I can't believe I'm saying this. We're evolving because James Hetfield is getting it. We're evolving because a grown man that's full of testosterone and motor oil said, I need help and a hug. We all need to look up to people. I made a video a couple of weeks ago that said, I no longer have heroes. But I look for the good in people. And right now, the good in people on this very public stage, just like his Scorpio in the 10th house shows, is a leader for mental health and saying, if you need help, here you go. Keep shining, James Hetfield. You don't even realize how many people's lives you've affected and changed by your voice, and you still continue to do it. It provides value, and we have your back, whatever that means. I'm not going to quote anything from Metallica right now because, of course, my brain kind of goes blank, but moreover, I don't want to get my video blocked. I probably will with all the other pictures I used. I just know that James Hetfield did something that so many of us crave. And that is to take a public light and say, hey, I kind of need help here. And he did it. All right, guys, signing off here. And James, remember to keep going. We're going to do the heart tap. Tell each other we care and love for one another as we raise the vibration, the energy of the world, so we can become the best version of ourselves and everything that we're meant to do. Click on the link below to schedule your own private reading, see my live shows, or sign up for my new tarot class coming out. That's going to be out in the middle of the summer. I'm going to have a European time as well as a U.S. time for the class. So twice in one day. It's a great topic. I'll see you guys soon. Thanks.